Hello, I'm Troy Kirby with Legislative Review for Wednesday, January 15th, where we cover the 2020 legislative session. Today's coverage includes hearings on data privacy, youth confinement, and worker harassment in long-term care facilities. Hello, I'm Troy Kirby with Legislative Review for January 23rd, covering the 2020 legislative session. Today's episode includes bills on the conversion of state buildings for the houseless, criminal asset forfeiture, and the regulation of the marijuana industry. The Senate's Labor and Commerce Committee held a public hearing on January 23rd, focused on 5 bills regulating the state's cannabis industry, including a point system tied to license renewals.
If really, in all respect to the sponsor in this, but if safety and wage and hour issues are the big issue here, when you look at the point system, those are some of the lowest points you get.
Hello, I'm Troy Kirby with Legislative Week in Review, covering the 2020 legislative session for its second week. Today's episode includes looks at bills concerning artificial intelligence in job interviews, regulation of firearms, and the cannabis industry.
The Senate Labor and Commerce Committee hearing is now in session.
The Senate Labor and Commerce Committee met January 20th, discussing Senate Bill 6171, which regulates tower crane disassembly, requiring labor and industries to be on site when a crane is taken down. Senator Karen Kaiser advocated for the bill in response to the April 27, 2019 crane collapse in Seattle.
We added a new fine in this bill that applies when there is a fatality.
Thank you for watching Legislative Week in Review, covering the second week of the 2020 legislative session. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or watch the full Legislative Review on TVW at 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. daily, with a weekend review show on Friday and the weekend. I'm your host, Troy Kirby. Senate Bill 6280 focused specifically on facial recognition, requiring state and local governments to develop accountability reports and an annual report when using the technology. The bill also establishes a facial recognition task force. Washington ACLU Representative Jennifer Lee said that the usage of facial recognition technology was a potential threat to democracy and community activism.
Because this bill seeks to regulate facial recognition without first giving the communities historically most impacted by surveillance an opportunity to say yes or no to the technology.
Lee's testimony drew the ire of Senator Joe Nguyen, the bill's sponsor, who took exception to the ACLU's claim that he had not taken enough input from minority communities, who Lee said were the most affected by facial recognition technology deployment.
I wanted to get more feedback on the community's input. So I've met with the ACLU probably a dozen times at this point, maybe with various folks, starting since last January 17th over the summer at coffee shops in West Seattle, on the phone, via text message. Does that count as input from communities? And Jevin, I'm assuming you agree on some of these points, right? How many times have I talked to you personally on this issue? And is that normal for a senator to come out and talk to students like that? Like, maybe it is, I don't know, right? So, and also as I believe a person of color that's an immigrant, that this would impact, like somebody had just said, this impacts Asians specifically. I feel like I am at the table, literally. So I appreciate that feedback, but help me be better at this.
The Senate Law and Justice Committee met in executive session on January 23rd, looking at several bills, including asset forfeiture.
That relates to money laundering proceeds used by the Gambling Commission. It would allow them to take forfeited proceeds and use it for gambling Commission training and law enforcement, and there are no amendments.
Senate Bill 6220 would waive restitution payments for any insurance provider for offenders who lacked the means to make a payment.
This bill is so specific for those individuals who are indigent. They really have no ability to pay. And given that it is for insurance companies whose entire business model is based on making sure that they can address the risk involved in insurance and loss. It just really makes a big difference to individuals who want to reintegrate back into society and have a fresh start, not to have this debt hanging over their heads.
Welcome to the January 22nd Senate Health and Long-Term Care Committee.
The Senate's Health and Long-Term Care Committee held a public hearing on January 22nd on Senate Bill 6254, which would ban the sale of flavored vape products. Governor Jay Inslee imposed a temporary ban in 2019, which ends on February 6th, 2020.
It's been mentioned several times. We're in the midst of a youth vaping epidemic. In 2019, about 27% of all high school students nationally had reported recent use of e-cigarettes, and of them, about a third reporting using e-cigarettes on 20 or more days in the past month.
Then they will go to the internet, and just so you know, just because we say it's illegal to purchase from the internet doesn't mean it's not happening.
We should not be spending our school meetings and PTSA money fighting this health crisis. We need to be focusing on educating our kids.
To put it simply, this bill is not only an extinction level event for adult vapor stores only, it will effectively shut down the sales of any vaping hardware and nicotine e-liquid in every licensed store in this state, convenience stores, gas stations, and actually you've just given the biggest gift you possibly could to big tobacco.